The wind cut through the jagged peaks like 1,000 unseen blades. Snow swirled in frozen patterns across the empty plains, hiding the scars of battle that no one dared speak of. Far below, the kingdom of Aloria stretched, its towers like black teeth biting the sky. And in the shadow of those towers walked a man who had once been a legend, a man now known only as a failure. He had been the Alpha King's trusted lieutenant, a warrior whose skill in battle had been unmatched. But a single mistake had ruined everything. A failed mission, a lost army, and a shame that clung to him like a second skin. The Alpha King had looked at him once with pride. Now that same gaze had turned to disdain. Whispers of betrayal followed him wherever he went. His name mattered no more. Only the memory of what he could not protect remained. The wind howled again as if mocking him, and he tightened his cloak against the cold. Far away in the warmth of the royal palace, life moved differently. There, the Alpha King's only son slept under heavy blankets, unaware of the danger approaching. The boy had never known his mother, and his father was a king more feared than loved. Still, he had the blood of warriors in his veins, even if he had yet to realize it. Rumors reached the exiled warrior through wandering merchants and travelers in the cursed forests. The prince, the heir to Aloria, was in danger. Internal rebellion, hidden treachery, and a curse that shadowed the royal bloodline threatened to end him before he could even claim the throne. The news stirred something he thought had long died in him, a spark of purpose. He had failed the king once. But he would not fail the boy. The journey was brutal. The forest he had once known as a child of the king's court had changed, twisted by dark magic and ancient curses. Trees moved as if alive, their roots grasping at the earth like the fingers of a hidden god. Shadows whispered lies, trying to weaken his resolve. Spectral figures of fallen warriors rose in the mists, their eyes empty, their mouths silent but accusing. The warrior fought on. He had no army now, only his courage, his skill, and the memory of what he had lost. Each step brought him closer to the boy, and yet each step reminded him of how far he had fallen. At night, he slept under the broken canopy of an ancient tree, the wind gnawing at him like the teeth of some unseen beast. He dreamed of the battlefield, of the soldiers he had failed, of the king's disappointed eyes. But even in those dreams, a new vision appeared. The prince, small and frightened yet unbroken, looking to him for protection. Days later, he reached the outskirts of a village burned to the ground. Smoke rose in thin, angry columns into the sky, and the smell of ash stung his nose. He approached cautiously, recognizing signs of a raid. The villagers had been taken, or worse, killed. He followed the tracks into the forest beyond, moving silently, aware that he was now the hunted as much as the hunter. The trail led him to a hidden clearing, where the prince crouched shivering and a small, cloaked figure stood near him. The advisor's eyes were sharp, assessing him immediately, as though measuring his soul for deceit. The warrior bowed slightly, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. "You've come far," the advisor said, voice quiet but firm. "Few make it this far and live. Why risk yourself for him?" The warrior met her gaze, the lines of guilt on his face softened by determination. "Because he is the king's son, and because I will not fail again." The advisor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. She seemed to sense the truth in his words, the honesty behind the scars, the weight of the past pressing down on his shoulders. They did not speak more before danger arrived. The sound of hooves broke through the forest, echoing like thunder. Rebel soldiers, masked and armed with cruel blades, had tracked them. The prince clung to the warrior instinctively, fear clear in his young eyes. The exiled warrior stood before the boy, his body a shield. He fought with the precision that had once won battles, moving like a shadow, striking like a storm. Each motion was controlled, deliberate, born of years of training and regret. The prince watched, frozen with awe, seeing not the man who had failed, but the protector who had returned. But the enemy was relentless. They pressed closer, surrounding them in a circle of malice. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And then, from the edge of the clearing, a figure appeared. A shadow cloaked in darkness, a being not fully human, its presence unnatural. The air turned cold, and the warrior realized that this was no ordinary battle. It was a test of courage, of will, of everything he had left inside him. He fought not for honor, not for praise, but for the boy who had no one else. Steel met steel, magic met flesh, and the forest itself seemed to bend to the chaos. The prince screamed, and the advisor's voice called out spells of protection. weaving light into the darkness. Finally, when the last rebel fell, the clearing fell silent. Snow drifted down gently, covering the blood-stained ground like a cruel reminder of what had happened. The prince clung to the warrior, his small hands gripping his cloak. "Will they come again?" the boy asked, voice trembling. "They will," the warrior admitted, "but I will not let them take you, not now. Not ever." For a moment the advisor watched them, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke soft but sharp. "The palace itself is no longer safe. You must leave this land. Take him to the wilds beyond the mountains. Only there can you keep him alive, and perhaps yourself as well." The warrior nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They would journey into the cursed lands, places even the bravest avoided. But he felt no fear, not yet. There was only determination and the silent promise to the boy in his arms. "You will survive, and through you I will reclaim the honor I lost." As they began to move, the shadows shifted around them, whispering of betrayal and past sins. The prince's small hand slipped into the warrior's, a gesture of trust that burned into his heart. For the first time in many years he felt the stirrings of hope. Yet danger was never far. From the trees, eyes watched, hidden figures tracking their movements. The exiled warrior knew that every step forward was a step into a trap. And still, he walked on, carrying the boy who was more than a prince. He was a symbol of everything the warrior had failed to protect, a chance at redemption, and perhaps a new beginning. The wind howled once more, carrying the scent of ice and blood. The forest seemed endless, the path unclear, and yet he pressed forward. Behind them, the palace lights flickered, a reminder of the life they had left behind, the enemies they had outrun, and the battles yet to come. The night closed around them like a dark veil. The prince, frightened yet trusting, slept in the warrior's arms. The advisor followed silently, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. And the warrior, once the Alpha King's greatest failure, now carried something far more precious than victory. He carried a chance to right the wrongs of the past. But the forest was alive with whispers. Curses long forgotten stirred in the darkness, and as the first rays of dawn struggled to pierce the sky, the warrior knew that this was only the beginning. If I fail him, the kingdom dies, and so does any hope of redemption for me. The snow fell heavier. The shadows lengthened, and the path ahead was filled with peril. The cursed forest stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of twisted roots and shadows. Every step the exiled warrior took was careful, measured, for he knew the dangers that lurked unseen. The prince clutched his hand tightly, small fingers pressing against his palm, trusting the man who had once been a failure but now was his only shield. The advisor moved silently beside them, her eyes scanning the shadows. She had stayed with them, despite warnings that it was too dangerous. The warrior had not spoken much, but in her presence he felt a flicker of comfort, a reminder that he was not alone in this journey. Their hearts carried burdens, guilt, fear, and unspoken longing. But for now, survival came first. They walked for days, surviving on meager supplies and the fruits of the cursed forest. Strange creatures watched from the darkness, their eyes glowing like embers. The exiled warrior fought off beasts both natural and supernatural, protecting the prince and advisor with unwavering skill. Each victory, however small, brought him closer to redemption. At night, they camped in hidden caves, safe from wandering enemies. The prince would stare at the fire, eyes wide with questions he could not yet ask. "Why did the king send you away?" the boy asked one evening, voice trembling. The warrior hesitated, memories of that fateful failure pressing down on him. He looked into the fire, his face shadowed. I made a mistake. A terrible one. The king thought I betrayed him. I failed." The boy's gaze was sharp, though still tinged with innocence. "But you didn't fail me." The words pierced him more deeply than any blade. For years he had carried the weight of disgrace, believing he was unworthy. And yet here was this small boy, unknowing yet wise, giving him a chance to believe in himself again. The advisor watched silently, a faint smile on her lips. She understood. The warrior's redemption was tied not to the king's approval, but to the life he now protected. Days turned to nights, and nights to days, as they navigated the forest. Then came the test, the forest's heart, a place no mortal had survived for centuries. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, forming corridors that seemed to shift as they moved. Shadows became walls. Whispering voices sought to trick them, offering promises of safety or threats of doom. The warrior kept the prince close, speaking softly to keep him calm. "Do not listen to the shadows. They cannot harm you unless you fear them." The boy nodded, clinging to him like a lifeline. Even in fear, he showed courage, the kind of courage that could shape a king. Suddenly, the ground trembled. From the darkness, a great figure emerged, a guardian spirit of the forest, its form massive and imposing. Its eyes glowed with an ancient intelligence. The warrior stepped forward, placing himself between the spirit and the prince. "You seek the blood of the king's son," the spirit said, its voice like the grinding of stone. "Why should I allow you to pass?" The warrior did not flinch. "Because I am not here for myself. I am here to protect him, and I will face anything to do so." The spirit studied him, and for a long moment there was silence. Then slowly it nodded. "Many have failed before you, but the courage in your heart, it may be enough." With that, the path cleared and the spirit vanished into the mist. Relief washed over them, but the warrior knew their trials were far from over. Finally, they reached the edge of the cursed lands, where the mountains rose like jagged teeth against the sky. Beyond lay Aeloria, the kingdom they had once called home, now in turmoil. Rebels had taken advantage of the Alpha King's absence, and the royal palace was surrounded by uncertainty. The warrior and his small party moved quickly, knowing that time was against them. The prince clung to him, silent but alert, and the advisor flanked them, ready for any threat. At the gates of Aeloria, the rebel forces met them. But the warrior was no longer the same man who had once fallen. He fought with precision, guiding the prince to safety while fending off attacks. Each strike was a declaration. He would not fail again. Inside the palace, the Alpha King awaited, furious yet astonished. His gaze swept over the exiled warrior, the boy, and the advisor. "You've returned," he said, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. The warrior bowed, weary but unbroken. "I have returned, my king, and I bring your son safely as I promised." For a moment, the king's eyes softened. He saw the courage in the warrior's stance, the unspoken sacrifices and the bond formed through trials. He saw not a failure, but a man who had walked through fire to protect what mattered most. The prince ran to his father, holding his hand tightly, and the king's expression shifted, pride, relief, and something unspoken that only a parent could feel. The advisor stepped forward, her gaze meeting the warrior's. No words were spoken, yet their understanding was complete. They had endured horrors together, and a quiet connection had formed, a trust born from hardship, respect, and shared purpose. But their challenges were not over. The rebels within the palace still lurked in shadows, and dark magic threatened to unravel the kingdom from within. The warrior knew that the true test of redemption was not just survival, but restoring the honor of the Alpha King's line and protecting the future of Aeloria. That night, in the quiet of the royal chambers, the warrior sat beside the prince. The boy leaned against him, eyes heavy with sleep. "Will you stay?" the prince whispered. The warrior looked down, feeling the warmth of the boy's trust. "I will stay," he said softly. "I will protect you as long as I live." The advisor watched from the doorway, a faint smile touching her lips. She knew that his journey of redemption was only beginning, but for the first time, hope glimmered in their lives, a fragile, shining hope that could withstand the darkness. As dawn broke over Aeloria, the snow melting into the rivers below, the exiled warrior felt the weight of the past lift slightly from his shoulders. He had returned with the prince, faced the dangers of cursed lands, and proved that even the greatest failure could rise again. The Alpha King approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have done what no other could," he said. "You have brought my son back, and in doing so, you have brought honor back to yourself." The warrior nodded, humbled but resolute. Redemption was no longer a dream, it was reality. The prince slept peacefully in his arms, the advisor's presence beside him, and the kingdom, though still fragile, had a chance to heal. And in that quiet moment, the warrior understood that failure was not the end. It was only a step toward something greater. A step that could lead to courage, trust, and perhaps a love born from trials, respect, and shared survival. The shadows of the past lingered and the future was uncertain. But for the first time in many years he felt whole. He had faced the darkness, returned with the prince, and reclaimed the honor that had been taken from him. And as the morning sun bathed the palace in light, he whispered quietly, almost to himself, "I was the Alpha King's failure, but now with his son and her by my side, even the darkest shadows cannot claim me." The wind outside carried a faint echo of battles past and victories yet to come, and the kingdom of Eloria, though scarred, would endure because sometimes even the fallen could rise, stronger than anyone expected.